For thousands of years, we have been told a comfortable lie about the dawn of humanity. A sanitized story of a man, a rib, and a compliant partner placed neatly into a perfect garden. But lurking within the margins of forbidden texts and the dark corners of ancient mysticism is a terrifying truth about what actually happened when the Creator first reached into the primordial mud. Before Eve ever drew breath, there was another entity, and she was not forged from the yielding, fragile bone of a man's cage. She was pulled directly from the exact same coarse, wet, violent earth as Adam himself. Her name was Lilith, and her existence was not a mistake, but it was the catalyst for the very first cosmic rebellion and the most violent celestial manhunt in the history of the universe. Imagine the heavy, suffocating perfection of Eden, a place where every leaf and stream was subjugated to strict divine order. Into this absolute hierarchy, the Creator breathed life into two perfectly equal beings. They opened their eyes, lungs burning with the first air of the world, and instantly the absolute material parity of their creation birthed an ideological war. Lilith looked at the man, felt the same dirt in her veins, and realized with absolute clarity that she owed him no submission. The friction between them was not a mere disagreement. It was a fundamental shattering of the patriarchal hierarchy Adam sought to impose upon the nascent world. You can almost hear the wet slap of flesh and the desperate scrambling in the dirt as the argument over physical and sexual positioning escalated into a brutal fight for dominance. Lilith, her eyes blazing with the fierce intelligence of the first dawn, flatly refused to be positioned beneath him. She stood her ground, declaring with unyielding conviction that they were equal, both torn from the exact same soil, neither superior to the other. Adam, blinded by his own assumed supremacy, demanded she take the bottom position, claiming she was fit only for subjugation, while he was destined to rule. As the tension reached a boiling point, it became horrifyingly clear to Lilith that Adam would never yield, and more terrifyingly, that the unseen Creator was not going to intervene to enforce the equality of her birth. Trapped in a paradise that was rapidly becoming a prison, she did not just wander away into the trees. She did something that shattered the very architecture of reality. Realizing the absolute impasse, Lilith abandoned the physical struggle and escalated the conflict into an act of supreme mystical warfare. Deep within her mind, she unlocked the ultimate divine frequency, the Shem HaMephorash, the true, hidden, and ineffable name of God. This was the linguistic code that underpinned the entire universe, a sound so dangerously holy it could unravel creation itself. She forced the forbidden syllables past her lips, weaponizing the sacred frequency not for worship, but for a violent, explosive escape. The sheer acoustic force of the name instantaneously mutated her physical form. Though she was born of the heavy earth, she was suddenly no longer bound by gravity. The ancient texts describe a horrific and beautiful transformation as she grew wings, becoming a terrifying aerial entity. With a concussive shockwave that must have flattened the perfect trees of Eden, she launched herself into the sky, violently shattering the boundaries of paradise and fleeing outward into the abyssal, uncharted wilderness of the ancient cosmos, leaving a stunned Adam alone in the dirt to answer to their Maker. But her escape was only the beginning of a nightmare that would soon rain down upon her. Left alone in the bruised silence of Eden, Adam fell to his knees in the dirt that was meant to be their shared cradle, looking up into the vast, indifferent sky to utter the very first human complaint. "Master of the universe," he cried out, his voice cracking with a mixture of betrayal and terror, "the woman you gave me has fled." The Creator did not reach down to gently coax her back, nor did he mend the shattered boundaries of paradise with a whisper. Instead, he answered this unprecedented breach of the cosmic order with an immediate, terrifying mobilization. He unleashed a specialized, elite task force of celestial enforcers, a triad of angelic hunters named Senoy, Sansenoy, and Semangelaf. These were not the gentle, glowing cherubs of later Renaissance paintings, but weapons of pure divine acoustics and violent authority. Their very names were forged from ancient protective magic, derived from the Semitic root SSM, an ancient warding technology meant to repel infanticidal horrors. When spoken together, Senoy, Sansenoy, Semangelaf creates a highly distinctive, aggressive sound pattern, a violent, sibilant frequency designed to mimic the menacing strike of a serpent or the crackling roar of an all-consuming fire. They were a spiritual auditory barrier, white noise with teeth, dispatched with a precise, ruthless, and legalistic mandate: bring her back, or execute a devastating biological sanction against her future lineage. A decree demanding that if she refused, 100 of her children would die every single day. Lilith did not fly aimlessly into the dark. Propelled by the raw, crackling power of the ineffable name, she tore through the sky, seeking a specific geographical and spiritual coordinate that matched the furious, untamed storm within her own mutated chest. She descended upon the extreme edges of the known world, specifically at the churning, violent waters of the Red Sea, known in ancient Hebrew texts as Yam Suf. This was not merely a body of water, but the primordial abyss itself, the howling, chaotic depths that existed long before the Creator imposed order upon the universe. Here, the air tasted of salt, iron, and ancient malice, heavy with the weight of lascivious spirits and night demons that swarmed the dark waves, making it the ultimate sanctuary for an entity who had violently severed her ties with divine order. Embracing this domain of Rahab, the mythical sea monster of chaos, she threw herself enthusiastically into the darkness, free from Adam's suffocating authority. She took demonic lovers, often identified as Samael the great demon, and began breeding her own monstrous offspring, the Lilim, at a staggering, horrifying rate of more than 100 babies a day. She thought she had found her kingdom in the abyss, a place where the oppressive light of Eden could never penetrate, mirroring the exact temporal coordinate where the chaotic forces of Pharaoh would later be crushed by the sea. But the storm above the black waters suddenly split open with terrifying velocity. The three angels descended not with grace, but with the blinding concussive force of a meteor strike, violently intruding upon the unmapped demonic wilderness to hunt the faint, winged silhouette of the fugitive. Armed with supernatural authority and gleaming, terrible lances, they cornered her in the midst of the raging waters, turning the chaotic waves of her chosen sanctuary into a massive, watery execution chamber. The ocean boiled and hissed around them as the Triad delivered the Creator's absolute ultimatum, commanding her to return to Adam and submit to the strict hierarchy of Eden. The wind screamed, whipping her dark hair around her face, as Lilith, unbowed, and heavily empowered by the dark energies of her new domain, looked directly at the celestial executioners and flatly refused. The diplomacy ended in a heartbeat. Aghast at her defiance and her haughty proclamation to breed a stronger demonic lineage, the three guardians lunged, using extreme physical force to compel her submission. Esoteric tradition recounts a brutal clash where they violently seized her, piercing her very hands and feet with their lances, physically hoisting her writhing, bleeding form into the storm, and suspending her precariously at the absolute edge of annihilation, above the roaring, hungry mouth of the Red Sea. Suspended by celestial lances over the black, freezing, chaotic waters of the Red Sea, the blood of the first rebel dripped into the foaming abyss. The angels, their faces glowing with a terrifying, unyielding divine authority, threatened to drown her in the very sanctuary she had chosen. The physical pain must have been absolute agony as the divine metal pierced her hands and feet. Yet as she hung at the absolute edge of annihilation, Lilith did not beg for her life. She did not ask for a return to the warm, suffocating dirt of Eden. Instead, she looked into the blinding light of her executioners and revealed her terrifying new teleology, declaring with a chilling calmness that she was only created in order to sicken babies. In that single, echoing declaration over the roar of the ocean, she abandoned any lingering claim to humanity and defined her eternal role as the ultimate antagonist of the human race. She laid out the exact, horrifying parameters of her dark jurisdiction, claiming absolute dominion over male infants from the moment of their first ragged breath until their 8th day of life, the exact day of the Brit Milah, or circumcision. For female infants, she claimed an even longer shadow, extending her dominion from birth until their 20th day of life. By defining these specific windows of vulnerability, she deliberately targeted the most terrifyingly fragile period of human existence, the immediate postpartum phase, a time characterized in the ancient world by catastrophic, unexplained infant mortality. The three angels were suddenly trapped in a profound theological paradox. They possessed the superior martial force to destroy her outright, but they could not unilaterally obliterate her, as she was a direct creation of God, forged from the original earth and now deeply, inextricably intertwined with the cosmic balance of suffering and human mortality. Unable to break her fierce will to remain independent of Adam's authority, the Triad negotiated a brutal, blood-bound treaty forged in the shadows of the Red Sea, establishing the supernatural laws of engagement that would dictate human and demonic relations for millennia. First, they enforced a devastating biological toll, a ruthless mathematics of death. Because she refused to return to her rightful place, Lilith was forced to accept that 100 of her own children, the demonic Lilim she was breeding in the abyss, would be slaughtered every single day. She agreed to this perpetual mass casualty event, a gruesome equilibrium maintaining the balance of the supernatural realm. But the second condition of the treaty was the absolute cornerstone of Jewish protective magic, a binding oath staked upon the name of the living and eternal God. She decreed that whenever she saw the angels, their names or their forms in an amulet, she would have no power over that infant. This was not a promise of universal peace, but a highly specific conditional ceasefire based on visual identification and claimed territory, a literal supernatural restraining order. The mechanics of this oath dictated that mere visual recognition of Senoy, Sansenoy, and Semangelaf, would force her to remember the lances in her hands, the threat of the drowning sea, and the daily slaughter of her children, forcing an immediate retreat. This violent confrontation was not merely an abstract theological fable confined to dusty medieval manuscripts. It was a desperately real, fiercely utilized technology of survival. For centuries, a mother in ancient Babylonia or medieval Europe faced the very real, terrifying possibility that her child would succumb to an invisible, inexplicable death. Without a modern medical understanding of sudden infant death syndrome or postpartum hemorrhage, the suffocating darkness that snatched breath from the cradle required a face, a name, and an actionable countermeasure. Long before the alphabet of Ben Sira formally codified the narrative in the 8th to 10th centuries, the residents of Sassanid Babylonia were burying hard physical evidence of their war against the mother of demons. Between the 4th and 8th centuries CE, Jewish communities, alongside Mandeans and Christians, produced thousands of ceramic incantation bowls, everyday earthenware vessels transformed into lethal spiritual traps by skilled practitioners. Imagine the stifling heat of modern-day Iraq, the smell of wet terracotta clay contrasting with the sharp scent of faded charcoal ink. Buried upside down beneath the thresholds or courtyard floors of homes, these bowls were metaphysical snares designed to catch the entities of the night. Viewed from directly above, a dizzying continuous string of Aramaic or Syriac script spirals outward from the absolute center to the rim. Trapped at the very center of this linguistic labyrinth is often a crude, line-drawn figure of a demon representing Lilith, her hands and feet visually bound or chained, a permanent physical echo of her violent subjugation by the angels' lances. The texts spiraling around her were supernatural legal documents, invoking the names of angels to execute a formal writ of divorce, a get against the demons, severing their parasitic right to inhabit the space. By utilizing early variations of the three angels' names, these communities weaponized the hissing phonetics to replicate the victory at the Red Sea, maintaining an organized industry of domestic protection against the abyss. As the centuries bled into the Middle Ages, this defensive architecture evolved from buried ceramic bowls into highly sophisticated, portable parchment and silver amulets, known in the Eastern European Jewish diaspora as the Kimpet Brevel, or childbirth letters. Picture the flickering, nervous candlelight of a birthing room, the walls seeming to close in as the shadows stretch long across the wooden crib. The amulet hung directly over the sleeping child was the ultimate realization of Lilith's oath, a weaponized design combining strict theology with striking visuals. The absolute core of every amulet was the explicit naming of the Triad, Senoy, Sansenoy, and Semangelaf, their names written repeatedly to maximize their sonic, hissing threat, because without them, the oath was null and void. They featured a direct exclusion clause, acting as a territorial marker stating Adam and Eve, excluding Lilith, formally barring her presence from the human lineage. But because she swore she must see their forms, the angels were frequently depicted not as humanoids, but abstractly, as bizarre, stylized, bird-like creatures, symbolizing their terrifying ability to swiftly traverse the cosmos and intercept her in the air. To ensure the magic held, the scripture was often encrypted, utilizing the Atbash cipher to disguise the ineffable name, brilliantly embedding the exact same divine magic Lilith used to escape Eden into the very trap designed to repel her. These pieces of paper were deeply trusted, legally binding contracts. A father or a midwife pinning this to a wall was not pleading for divine mercy. They were acting as cosmic lawyers, thrusting Lilith's own sworn testimony into her face and invoking the authority of the Red Sea Treaty to order her immediate retreat into the dark. They weaponized the hissing phonetics of angelic names and codified a blood-bound oath to forge a tangible shield, ensuring that in the terrifying shadows of the nursery, the evoked presence of the three celestial enforcers stood as an absolute, unyielding barrier between a fragile new life and the hungry void. We worship the blinding, ordered light of Eden. But the iron shield that actually kept humanity alive in the dark was forged by negotiating with a monster. This is the profound, subversive irony at the heart of our most ancient survival mechanisms. We are taught to eradicate the darkness, to suppress the chaotic, rebellious parts of our nature in exchange for the safety of a perfect, compliant garden. But the story of the first cosmic rebel reveals a terrifying psychological truth. When you try to force a fundamental part of yourself into a subordinate role, when you deny your own equal footing in the dirt of your own life, that suppressed identity does not simply vanish. It mutates. It weaponizes its pain, shatters the boundaries of your carefully constructed reality, and flees into the abyss, only to return as the very monster that haunts your quietest, most vulnerable moments. The perfectionism we build to protect ourselves often becomes the exact cage that breeds our greatest demons. Do you choose the safe, suffocating order of the garden, or the dangerous, monstrous freedom of the churning sea? The threshold between order and chaos is thinner than you think, and the entities waiting in the deep waters were there long before the angels ever learned to fly. To witness the horrific truths of what actually slumbers in the primordial abyss, subscribe and prepare yourself for the next chapter.